All right, man, that gets me fired up. Thank you, guys. Well, hey, I realized I did not introduce myself. If you're new here, my name's Terry Phillips. I'm the campus pastor here, and it is really, really good to be with you. Again, we got some fun stuff planned for tonight, so really excited about that. If you have not been here, we've been in the middle of this series called Follow the Leader, this idea that God actually is good, that God wants to speak to us, and God actually wants us to do something about it. What if we really believe that? And this past week, we had the chance to talk about how you cannot effectively follow the leader. You cannot effectively follow where Jesus is going unless you have a tribe. And we described that a tribe is simply a group of people that is connected to each other, connected to a leader, and connected to an idea or connected to a vision. And actually, that's a lot of how we think about Crossroads. We think about the whole Crossroads team and all the sites, and we think about this Florence campus as being a tribe that is going after things that Jesus cares about. And actually, what I want to do for a minute, I want to encourage you guys. I want to encourage this tribe and team and actually brag on you guys for a little bit. So this past Sunday, I had a chance to talk about my and April's journey through infertility, and actually just how tough that was, what a roller coaster it was for the 2 years that we were on that journey, and how people spoke hope to us, and how much that meant, because it's just such a lonely place to be. And you know, we kind of stopped for a minute and said, if you are going through that, please email me, let me know, because I want you to know you're not alone. I want you to know there are people that love you. I want you to know that God cares about you. And I had 3 couples this week that sucked up and emailed me to say, look, we are in a place of struggling, and we want people to pray for us and come around us. So I was encouraged that people got over that vulnerability hump. And let me tell you what was even more encouraging. I had 8 couples that said, I would love to come alongside and pray because we've been through that journey and we have hope to share. That's cool. Like, that's a part of what being a tribe is about. And I just want to brag on this tribe that we're hearing where the leader's telling us to go, and we're following through and doing that. That is what being a part of the tribe is about. And tonight, I actually want to talk about one of the most powerful tools that the leader gives us. One of the most powerful tools that he gives us that allows us to get to new places. And the way to describe it, I think it's something that every successful tribe does. It's something that every tribe passes down through generations, and it's a way that tribes really keep their DNA. And this tool is called tribal stories. It's called tribal stories. And it's interesting, as we think about this campus, we've only been here a short time. I said about a week ago, we celebrated our 6-month anniversary of this site being open, which has been amazing. And I just want to talk about some of the story that's happened as we get started here. And so, you know, as we looked at getting started in Florence, I'm just reminded that as we started, we had prayed and we had hoped that our first weekend, we would have 1,600 people come. Actually, it was 1,588. We had these annoying calculations. 1,588 people, 1,600 people come. And I'm reminded that the first weekend, 3,400 people came up. 3,400 people. Give me a break. This is Florence, Kentucky. 3,400 people came to be a part of a church, and not only they come, they took up all the parking spaces that we had. Actually, we had 1,600 at the first service. So in other words, we may have been praying a little incorrectly about we had that many per service. We took up all the parking spaces here. We also took all the parking spaces across the street. Now, I'm reminded that a part of our story is we didn't know what to do, and we changed our service times, but we really prayed that God would show up and give us a solution. And we talked to Mike and Colleen Detzel over at the Florence Antique Mall. And we said, man, is there any way that you would maybe consider us have some of your parking in the back? And they said, actually, you can have all of our front lot, and you can have it for free, and we hope that you park there forever. Are you kidding me? Like, amazing ways that God is showing up with this tribe and through this team. And not only that, after 8 short weeks, we made the decision, a very tough one, to have a Saturday service here because we believed that a lot of our friends couldn't make it on a Sunday and they would come on a Saturday. And we've been having hundreds of people every Saturday night come. And I want to tell you, there are people on this team that sucked it up because it is not easy. It is difficult. And those people that are serving on Saturday are having to come back on Sunday. But they said this is important enough that our friends have a place. That's the crazy kind of sacrifices this tribe is making. And the story just continues. We kicked off an amazing journey. We had a 6-week journey where hundreds of people got in small groups, and at the end of that 6-week journey, right here in front of the stage, we had 104 people in one weekend that decided to get baptized. Unreal, right? unreal, the stuff that's happening. All right, I just want to keep going. We collected Thanksgiving food drive boxes, and over 2 weekends, people gave out those boxes. In 1 weekend, 1,000 boxes were returned, 600 boxes that went to local organizations, and almost over 300 that went overseas to South Africa. Amazing love that happened. And then we had Angel Tree, and 656 gifts went to kids that had incarcerated parents or kids that weren't going to have a Christmas because their parents weren't able to give them gifts. Crazy, amazing stuff. We had a Christmas Eve service where if any of you were here, it was packed and it snowed inside this auditorium, right? How unbelievable is that? And then, God just keeps doing these crazy things in our 6-month story where it's Super Bowl Sunday. We had 3,900 people come here. 39, it's just crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And those are kind of remarkable things, the remarkable stories we get to see when we're a part of this tribe here. But what I want to say is that tonight, I wouldn't be doing you justice if I said that our story is a 6-month story. I wouldn't be doing you justice if I said, that's our story. It's just this 6 months and we're continuing to go from here. Because actually, our story goes a lot back further. And actually, if you're a part of this team, a part of this tribe called Crossroads, we actually have an amazing 17-year story of how God's been showing up in our city, how God's been showing up in our community. And I want to tell you, I am really excited because I cannot think of a better person to actually be telling these tribal stories for you, telling the history that if you are part of this place, then you are a part of. And so I want to invite up our senior pastor. I want to invite up a guy that wishes he looked as good as I do in a Boy Scout uniform, Brian Tome. Let's welcome him. Give him a Florence welcome.
You were sexy in the Boy Scout uniform.
It's true. It's true.
I just want the gray, paint on hair is what I want right there.
I knew that was coming.
How long does it take for you to look in the mirror and just go, put a little more right there?
All right. I'm going to think of another one to get you in a minute. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Hey, it's an honor to be here tonight, and just hearing the stories that are happening here over 6 months is very, very inspiring, and it just takes me back to a lot of stories that have been happening. And this practice of recounting stories is as old as the Bible itself. In fact, so much of the Bible is festivals or round table meetings where people are recounting the faithfulness of God in their midst. And God actually saying, you make sure you do these festivals because you need to remember the story. And sometimes, even before the amazing miracle happens, God institutes a ceremony that makes sure that everybody will talk about it forever. Here's one such situation in the book of Joshua, chapter 4. It's just before the nation of Israel is about to go into the promised land. And they're about to go over the river Jordan, which is a psychological barrier for them. They've never been over there. It's full of fear and everything else like that. And here's what Joshua, the new leader of the nation of Israel, tells his people. Joshua said, then pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. So when you go over there, drop those 12 or 13 stones. How the tribes are numbered is either 12 or 13. I don't want to get into deep stuff like that. But 12 or 13, drop those stones on the other side of the river, and then whenever somebody is coming by that river, they go, that's kind of weird. What are the stones? Oh, let me tell you what the stones are. Those stones are about how my God took my people out of slavery, out of bondage, miraculously, and we crossed this river, we crossed our fears, and the story of God's involvement in my life continues. It was telling the tribal story. The New Testament is in large part a tribal story. Part of the reason why it didn't get written down, the New Testament canon, was not for a couple hundred years or so after, for about 100 so years or so until after Jesus died. Wasn't that people hadn't thought of writing things. It was that the way tribal stories were shared was orally, and they made sure they remained accurate. We read the Bible right now, we read the New Testament, we think, oh yeah, they had to write it down and make sure they got all the doctrine correct. Well, that's part of it, but the New Testament was not primarily concerned about getting the doctrine correct. It was a concern about keeping the tribal stories going of what Jesus had done. It's communicating truth to the tribe that's in Ephesus, the tribe that's in Corinth. So these stories are important. So as I reflected on these, just a few, I don't know how much time I'm going to have once I start going, but a few of these that you might have heard before if you were a part of Crossroads before Florence started. If you have heard them, it's good for us to hear these and remember these again and again. Where did it start? It started back in 1995. I came out of a performance review in my church that I was on staff on, and I walked out of that and I sensed God telling me, you are never to go through one of these performance reviews again. Not that it was bad or unhealthy, I just sensed God saying to me, your run here is done, you need to get out and be stretched and try different things. And so that started a whole year of just networking, answering every ad I could, seeing what was happening. And what do you know? The only people who extended any offer to me at all was 11 people in the Cincinnati area, in the Hyde Park Mount Lookout area of Cincinnati, who said, we will guarantee your salary for 1 year. If you come here, and these were all, no one was over 31, I don't believe. If we have to tap into our retirements, if we have to sell our house, we'll guarantee your salary for 1 year if you come and help us reach our friends who've given up on church, but not necessarily on God. So we sent out this mailer, and this was sort of a picture that was on that mailer of some of these folks saying, hey, look at us, we're young, cool white people. Yes, we are. Don't you want to come to our church? This was actually a very cool picture way back when. It was very, very cool. And I'll never forget, we spent all the money we had. I think it was $50,000 in startup costs to start the church. And we were flat broke by the time we got up to the very first Sunday. And I was afraid to turn around. I went in the front row, and I was afraid to turn around and look behind me because I had this fear that gripped me the night before. I realized, man, everything I've ever tried to do something in service to God, it never meets my expectations, hopes, or prayers. Never had all my years of following Christ. And I thought, gosh, we spent all our money. This is going to be a failure. People are going to be depressed. That's what I was thinking. So I walked down front. I got there early in the service, sat down. I said, I'm not going to turn around and look behind me. I'm not going to do it because I don't get depressed, and then I won't be able to preach right. I'll never forget Steve Andrew walked up, and he whispered in my ear and said, hey, when you get up there, make sure you ask people to scrunch to the center because we have no more seats or programs for anybody. I said, what? I turned around, it was pandemonium amounts of people. It was ridiculous amount of people. It was an amazing thing, one of the best starts of a new church. It was no denominational funding, not part of a denomination. There wasn't some other church that was sending a bunch of people to start. It was just 11 people, then was 35 with a dream, and it was one of the most miraculous things those of us who were part of it had ever been a part of. The other miraculous thing is we've been working with Catholics who have been a blessing to us and a help to us. I don't know if you know much, but Protestants and Catholics haven't always seen eye to eye on things. And I remember my first office, the first place where we had our basically last Wednesday service we had on Wednesday nights was in a Catholic monastery, an old Catholic monastery. And there was a woman who moved back into the Catholic monastery. She was a former Mother Superior, and we struck up an amazing friendship. Her name is Sister Mary Columba. We were able to capture her on video a few years ago. We were able to dig it up, and look what Sister Mary says about us.
They were already beginning to plan the Crossroads and how they were going to go about forming this church. And I do recall that there was some opposition because I think that they were very, very enthusiastic, very energetic, and they were going to get the job done. And so perhaps there was a little bit of uneasiness on the part of some of the other church members, the local church. And but I personally believed very much in what they wanted to do, that it was the work of God's kingdom and how to reach to the unchurched. And they had a wonderful strategy how to do it. And so we made room for them at the monastery, and they had their offices there for some time. And their services were held at the monastery until they grew and they needed more space. Brian is very loud, you know. And I remember he had this office in the first floor. And so we were trying to keep the monastery rather quiet, And so sometimes I walk the hall and Brian would be on the phone laughing, at high speed. And I turn around and says, shh.
Beautiful, amazing woman. She really is. One of the few people who believed in us. And we just were, doing anything we could to just work and keep things going and keep things afloat. We found this school to rent. We grew out of this little monastery for our Wednesday night services, and we know we needed something else for the weekend, so we found this old school. It was People's Middle School, and it was really run down. It was not in a good way. In fact, actually why we were able to rent it. It's generally very difficult to rent a public school, but Cincinnati Public Schools was so hurting financially and just wanted anybody to have an interest in their schools that they said, yeah, you can come. The only problem was their auditorium. You could see we had this auditorium. One of our first investments we made in that school was seat covers. This was a junior high school, and people had taken pens and written on the back of all these things. And I'll never forget, the vice principal's name was Mr. Jump. And apparently, from what the kids had written on the back of the seats, he could do all kinds of things to himself, which I thought were anatomically impossible. I didn't know a person could actually do that to themselves. And we thought it might be a little bit distracting for someone to be in a church environment and seeing, how would that look? And so we actually got all these seat covers, and every week we'd have volunteers put them on and take them off, put them on and take them off, because we wanted to remove any distraction we possibly could to have people hear about Christ. And things just continued to grow. We had our first membership class. We kind of sat around and said, oh my gosh, membership. I guess there is this thing called membership. We haven't thought much about that. We got these scads of people. Yeah, we'll do a membership class. Let's do that. So we threw together this membership class, and it was just packed. I'll never forget, in the very front row, there was a guy there, and he was all nervous. His leg was going up and down, and he had the first question. He had the first question. His first question, he said, aren't all religions the same? And you're not one of those people that believes that Jesus is the only way, are you? He had been around for 2 months or so, and he went from this ball of nerves. He was a stated agnostic. He was a legal professor at UC. And we saw in the midst of that conversation and through the process him come to receive Christ. He became a tither, and then actually he served on our finance team for years and years and years, doing amazing things. And it started with just rank and file person being a seeker and wanting to have his heart changed. Those are always the best stories. We talk about numbers, and numbers are important in that they talk about the magnitude of what God's doing, but it always boils down to the individual story, the personal story. Some of those stories came about with difficult conversations. As we started to take off and we started to grow, we were having 3 services on a weekend. We started doing a Saturday night service, and we were jamming up the entire area of Hyde Park. Totally jamming it up. I mean, middle schools are not made for cars. And we found that when someone goes to church, generally they like to bring their car with them. That's one of the things they like to do. And people were just everywhere, just parked all over the place. And we had this urologist on the other side of the street. The people would actually park in front of his driveway, and he couldn't even get out on call. The neighbors hated our guts. We did everything we could, put up cones. You can't control what people are going to do when they're coming to check out your church, right? So we decided that we need to get our own permanent facility. Maybe we can buy the school, because Cincinnati Public Schools is in a hard way. We heard that some schools are going up in the auction block. Maybe we could buy the school, and beside it, the monastery, where our offices were. Put them all together, and boom, all's good. So we started exploring that, and we said, let's reach out to the neighbors and make sure they're okay with this. Just so we build some bridges. So we pulled the neighbors in, because we knew they hated our guts. We just wanted to put our best foot forward. We were talking about things, trying to help them. They were not liking us at all. I mean, our olive branch to them was like toilet paper. They could care less about our olive branch. It wasn't going well. We had this ace in our hole. Brian Wells was one of the original 11, and I was on staff for a while. He and I had this ace in the hole, and he said, well, we know the parking is really a hard thing for you, and we want to alleviate the parking. So what we're hoping to do is we want to build a parking garage on that property right across your street to take away all the parking garage. We found out, we hadn't thought about this, no one really wants a parking garage outside their front door. And honestly, it never crossed our mind that people went, parking garage, parking garage. And this one lady specifically, parking garage, parking garage. It was like that old movie money when the old movie and the guy's going, refund, refund, parking garage. Yeah, that was not a very good scene at all. Remember that one in a moment because I'll come back to it. Well, we find out that we cannot go in this place, and we decide to put a bid on an old abandoned, it was going to be abandoned, was on an old HQ warehouse, the predecessor of Home Depot. And we decided, let's do this. Let's figure out maybe God is in this. So we called a prayer meeting. We called 30 people to go in the parking lot and pray over this building. We couldn't invite the whole church because we didn't want to tell people in the church. We had a lot of people who were developers and such. We didn't want to create marketing awareness and create other bidders. They're going to be going against this bankrupt property. So we were meeting in the parking lot, and we're praying. We're holding hands out there. Generally, I'm not a hand holder when we pray, but this seemed like a holy enough moment. Okay, we're holding hands. So we're out there in the parking lot, and we're praying. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, I think she was, I don't know what she was at the time, 8 maybe, holding her hand. She looks at me and says, "Daddy, why don't we march around this building 7 times, just like Joshua did with Jericho?" And I said, "That's a great idea, honey." I said, "Folks, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're just like Joshua marched around Jericho 7 times and blew the trumpets. The walls fell in. They went in, took the land. We're going to march around this building 7 times and pray that God blinds and confuses our enemies. Because tomorrow we go to Wall Street. I was going to go to Wall Street the next day and bid on this property. We're going to pray that God blinds and confuses anybody who's going to bid against us." So we take off. We're taking off and we're walking around this building, and we're silent because you read the story. They're silent when they're doing it. We're kind of walking. And I don't know if you've ever walked around one of those buildings. It is a big freaking building. Let me just tell you right now. It's a garden center, chain link fence. It took about 10 minutes for a lap. Every lap was about 10 minutes. And these are people who just come from work. We didn't come for a hiking expedition. We came to stand and pray. So I remember walking behind one guy, Marcus Gardner. He's got penny loafer shoes on. He's got some chinos on. They used to have chinos back then. We call them khakis now. They were chinos. And there was these high weeds on the side. He's trudging through these weeds. I got my 2 little kids with me, and I have one of them on my shoulder. I'm kind of holding it. My back is starting to go out. After about 2 rounds, I thought to myself, you know what? That point's probably made right now. We don't, there's no need to go any further. And I sensed God saying to me, it was a thought that I had, and it was the kind of thought that Jesus would generate. And I know God approved of it, so I took it as speaking to me. It was God saying to me, "Brian, you want a miracle, but you don't want to walk 7 times. If you want a miracle, you have to show up. You have to show up." So everyone just walked 7 times around. By the way, while we're going around, the store was still open. It was open. So as we were going around, you're trying to cut corners. You can't cut corners on a cinder block building, but you're getting as close to the wall as you can. And so it had those automatic doors. And so we're walking by, so about every 10 minutes, people when they'd be working, all of a sudden, so next day, go down it's on Wall Street. It's a couple floors beneath street level. And all of these properties are up for block. And Home Depot is there to bid. Lowe's is there. Mom, Pop. All these properties all over the nation. And we had $4.6 million was the amount we could spend. And that is the exact amount we got it at when the bidding ended. The exact amount. I remember being just totally blown away. When I got home, we had an offer of one big box retailer who offered us double what we had paid for it. And the next month, we would have 2 more. We found that God literally blinded and confused our enemies. People who were supposed to be there missed their plane. Partners thought that the one was supposed to be there, and the other thought the other was supposed to. God literally blinded and confused our enemies in the name of Jesus. the name Jesus, in order for us to have that facility. It's one of the many crazy, miraculous things that took place. We get into this building and it starts to grow, it starts to take off. We start adding on to it, and we realize that God is asking us to do things beyond just have crowds. God is wanting us to have a vested interest in the welfare of the Cincinnati region. The kingdom of God means that all boats rise, that the way of God flourishes in a city, that a local church is seen as being a blessing to the city. So we had a couple, Phil and Eileen Tan. They started doing this food drive thing. Actually started at People's Middle School. It's an informal thing. I got like 5 friends, small groups. Let's do this thing, and we'll all just kind of come together and bring our food boxes at church, and then we'll kind of do something with them. And then people start catching on, and then eventually we adopted as an official program to where 2 people's faithfulness resulted in hundreds of thousands of meals this last year, what Terry just talked about. All that came as a result about 2 people's interesting idea that just built credibility. We also started having a vested interest in South Africa. We felt a calling to that actual nation. We started putting massive amounts of money, massive amounts of volunteers into that place. We built an AIDS hospice, the largest privately funded, and owned and operated AIDS hospice in the country. And on the trip one of the trips we went over there to see how it was going, there was an interesting doctor that went on this medical trip. He was giving some volunteer time, and I got to know his story. He was a urologist, and he actually lived across the street from People's Middle School. I said, "You're kidding, I remember your wife." Parking garage! Parking garage! He was a Jew. He had been coming to Crossroads for a while as a seeker, had not received Christ. And on that trip, I had the opportunity to actually be able to pray for him to receive Christ, and someone actually caught the photo. It's always the personal story of what God does in life. Always, always is. And he had the ability to do what he did because of unbelievable sacrifice by people. And we've gone into buildings and we've built buildings like this one. It's never because there's any millionaire that you've known of who's given money. You wouldn't know anybody you've ever seen as our top givers. It's normal people who just lay everything on the line. Our first campaign, this happened all the time. Remember a couple saying the only thing we have of value is our engagement rings. We're going to take them off. We're going to give our engagement rings. That's all they had. People found out about that in the church, said, "Hey, how about we buy the wedding rings, the engagement rings, and then we'll buy them for them, and then they can give that money, but they'll have their wedding ring." I said, interesting. I asked them an idea. I said, "Oh, no way. God wanted us to give that. That's what God wanted." I remember one young couple. He had a promising career in a major corporation out here in town, a different one, and they made a $100,000 commitment. $100,000 commitment. And then they got transferred. He got transferred. And he fulfilled a $100,000 commitment, and to this day never saw the building. His first check was when he was moving. He fulfilled, and never to this day has seen it. They're my age now. They're 47 or something like that. Crazy. It's always the sacrifices, the average people in the tribe that actually do the most things. It's not the stuff that are cool and flashy on screens. It's the average sacrifices of the average people. When we started getting serious about CityLink, we knew that we needed to put money into it. We built an addition on the Oakley campus. We said, we can't just build this building bigger and bigger. We've got to start being more serious about poverty in our city. And so we took an aggressive swing at a new model. And we had people didn't like the idea of the model, didn't like it at all. In fact, people were actually very angry about it, including some people who were actually part of Crossroads Oakley, who had properties in the area in which we were going to go. So we were their information pipeline. So they just took all the information we were telling people, and they would funnel it to a group of dissidents, and it was just constant turmoil all the time. On the night, we had a prayer dedication, I think it's the only dedication event in the history of a multi-million-dollar building for basically worship that had picketing because we were doing too much for people in poverty. Our opening prayer night, we had picketers from other parts of the city just man, it was stressful. It was difficult. Just standing outside, trying to kill the buzz. And it was a strange, tumultuous time. And to go from there to where it is now universally accepted, CityLink, where we had 3D models, and now it's universally accepted by every city leader, and people are seeing it as the best in class and trying to invest money into it because it's a new thing to bless people. It's crazy. We have people right now who call down at CityLink. It's crazy when you take a look at what CityLink looks like versus what the rendering was like. It looks the same. One of the things that's interesting about our tribe is when we cast vision, God has seen fit to actually fulfill the vision, not chop it to pieces so you can't even tell it's there any longer. He actually fulfills the vision. It's amazing how he has done that. And to see CityLink thriving the way it is right now is really beautiful. At the Oakley campus, half of all the calls that come into the Oakley campus, half of everyone who stops the front desk is coming looking for money. Looking for, check, a food card. I mean, it's in an area of the city where there's more poverty perhaps than right here in Florence. And so I was really concerned. It takes a lot of energy for people to kind of deal with people in a loving manner and yet say no. Or put them in the healthy process. It's very difficult, very, very stressful on staff and volunteers. And so I called down to CityLink a couple months ago and said, are you guys having problems with this? Because if we're getting overwhelmed in Oakley, I can only imagine what it's like. And they said, no, actually, we don't have any problem with that at all. I said, you're kidding. So no, actually, people call here and they say, hey, I understand you're trying to get me out of poverty. Is that right? And they say, yeah, that's right. I said, of all the years I've been going to different agencies, no one has ever told me that was the vision. I'll be down next week. We never thought that the vision of getting someone out of poverty would be a compelling new idea. It's a compelling new idea for people in poverty in our city because most of the care is justifiably just helping somebody in the immediate moment, not helping them find a system. And so to see that happen when we, as a tribe, persevered for 9 years. Persevered for 9 years when people said it wouldn't work. Persevered for 9 years when people said it shouldn't work. Persevered for 9 years. People said you'll never be able to do that unless you have some big millionaire person put their name on the building. You'll never get average people to actually be able to. For us to do it over 9 years as a result and a sign again of God's faithfulness to our tribe. That faithfulness hasn't necessarily mean everything has been easy. Things have been actually very hard, very frequently. Very hard. One of our worst times as a tribe was on the opening night of our awaited show a few years ago, 4 years ago or so I think it was. The opening night, I'm sitting in the front and we're doing a Magi scene where there's ropes that are tied to catwalks. And the Magi, if you've been to awaited, you can see they're on blocks right now on the stage. But for one year or one show, there was ropes and the 3 Magi were swinging and doing stuff like that over the stuff. And I was over here on this side and one of the girls fell. And I thought to myself, ooh, that's going to leave a mark. It didn't look that bad from where I was sitting. It just didn't look like, ooh, fell. She fell to her death, right in an aisle, right in the middle of people. I had neighbors who were there for the very first time. They were very close to it. There was a first exposure to Crossroads, and there's somebody who's fallen to their death. It was an agonizing and brutal time. Emotionally, relationally, spiritually. I mean, it was just, your hair's falling out. It was any angle you look at it, it's just crushing. Went to the funeral. I did the funeral. Family wanted me to do the funeral. We did that funeral, and we poured all the Crossroads resources we could to be of some assistance to that family. And at that funeral, one of the brothers, who obviously and appropriately had some bitterness towards me, in part of his little eulogy, he pulled out a little piece of paper they had found in Carrie's apartment when they went to clear it out when she had died. And I keep that. It's a check, and it's a Post-it note on the check that she was about to send, but she didn't get a chance. But he gave this to me. This is her handwriting. She was going to write to us. I thank God daily for the blessing this church has been in my life. Thank you all for your continued hard work, and know that you are making a difference. a warrior, a volunteer in our midst, had been down. And it marked us. We had to say, okay, how serious are we about continuing to do aggressive things? How serious are we about continuing to allow the arts to flourish? I mean, we could just do some little kid pageant thing and everyone think it's cute. I mean, are we pushing too hard? Are we doing, we had a lot of soul-searching questions in the midst of that. But yet we persevered through that, and we saw even through that, God used that event to catalyze people for it to be the most successful thing, as far as I know, just happening anywhere at Christmas. About 50,000 people from Cincinnati region was able to be there this year. And it's in large part because of Carrie's faithfulness. In fact, if I was Carrie, a single person who wasn't leaving behind the family, it's actually a beautiful way to die. It's a perfect way to die. You die instantly, serving your God, doing exactly what you want to do, bringing people to Christ. As far as the follower of Christ, there's no better scenario. It sucks for the rest of us, and especially the family. But as far as no better scenario. And we saw God redeem that. God never wastes anything. Anything of difficulty in your life, I promise you, He never wastes anything. Hundreds of people have come into the kingdom as a result of that show since. Maybe more than that. It's because an average person in the tribe, full heart devoted to God, just said, I will give myself. I will do what needs to be done. And it's been the story of our tribe, that was an extreme one, but it's the story of our tribe over and over again. The starting of Mason. We had a huge, massive building in Oakley that wasn't full, plenty of empty seats. And we said, God wants us to go to people because Jesus doesn't want to just have a bigger and bigger place for people from further away to come here. We need to go to people. And in fact, when we go to people, we'll have a wider infrastructure to bless the entire region. So we said, let's try this multi-site thing. Like, yeah, people will watch a video sermon, right? People say, oh, it'll work. Oh, but there's a bunch of rabid volunteers who said, no, we're going to roll up our sleeves, get this done. Staff members who just expended themselves entirely. And what do you know? It worked. It worked. In fact, our reputation was such that Crossroads was a blessing to the Cincinnati Public Schools and came to be known as a blessing all over the city, that the city of Mason, who specifically wrote rules in their bylaws to never allow a church to rent any of their facilities, the city of Mason unanimously rewrote their bylaws just for us because they wanted Crossroads to be there. And it's taken off as a result of it. And out of that, we said, man, we need to do more of these. We need to do more work in Africa. We need to do more work in India. We need to start more sites. So we had another campaign, and we said, let's go to Florence. It seems like we got more and more people who are coming from Florence, look and see where God's moving and go be a part of it. There seems to be a lot of activity down in Florence from people who are driving a long way. There seems to be a unique need that we can fill with our sort of dialect. So we came down here. I mean, I don't know if you get the magnitude of it. It's not necessarily a wise financial thing to spend $15 million before any person comes to the church. Or whatever it was. Terry, what was the cost of this thing? I can't remember. That was? Yeah, about somewhere around there. Major step of faith after much prayer and planning. Major. And that's why Terry, when he talks about those numbers of 1580, 83, woo, it's not like, woo, yay, numbers, we love numbers. It's, oh my gosh, that was such a step of faith, stepping into the Jordan River, and God parted it. And we put everything on the line. That's why this campus is a special one. All of them are special, but this part of the unique story that's right here in Florence. And the tribal stories, they never end. I'm just giving you some of them. I'll just give you one last one, because it just happened this last week. There's hundreds of these things, hundreds of them. And we need to keep sharing these things because it reminds us that we have a good God. And He's good to this church called Crossroads, this tribe of people. He has not forgotten us. When I was personally moved by the India situation of forced rape for profit, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and I've said this story too, there was one girl we referred to as Mala that really broke my heart when she was coward and broken and just looking up through her eyebrows. That was the picture that haunted me. This last week, Don Jarrett is our director of justice. went over to India and he was doing some things. And Don's a pretty straight shooter, and he's also, he would admit this, one of his more endearing qualities is cynicism. In a healthy way. And Don went, if you've ever been to India, it is one of the most vastest, largest people conglomerated things in the world. It's the most conglomerated and congested thing I've ever been to, all of my travels. It smells, it's overrun, it is just a cacophony of sound and everything. I mean, trying to find anything in India is next to impossible, let alone accidentally stumbling into something that you wanted to find. So Don goes to lunch, just some place in the middle of India, this last week, and who happens to be at his server? Mala. And she's smiling. He caught her afterwards. They made the connection. She said, yeah, I'm an IJM girl, International Justice Mission. His heart just broke. He said, I admit that my cynicism, I remember that girl too, and I just thought, there's no way God can redeem her. There's no way she can get healing. There's no way she will ever smile again. And then to be in the middle of India, and God arranges that meeting, crazy. We serve a big God. We come underneath a big God who is intricately involved in every detail in our lives and wants even more access. He wants us to follow him as leader, including to our death, which is what we do when we follow Jesus. We come to a cross. Terry's going to come up right now and memorialize, if you will, the tribal story of why we're going to partake in communion. Come on up, Terry.
Man, thank you, Brian. Thank you. You know, Brian, if we follow a leader, I'm thankful that we also have fathers like you. I mean that. Like, I'm thankful that we have people that have role modeled, that help to develop these tribal stories. And what I want to say to all of you is that if you are part of this tribe and this team, and I say this as an encouragement, not even as a responsibility, but first as encouragement, you are a part of these tribal stories. Like, as you hear these stories like that, this is actually something that you will keep alive, that you will be able to live out. Like, these tribal stories are yours. And actually, there's one more tribal story that I want to share with you tonight. And this tribal story happened about 2,000 years ago. As Jesus was sitting with people that were closest to him in this intimate environment. And he sat down with them and he said, you know, I want to do this with you because you're going to forget. I want to do this with you because I want you to remember this. And he got together with the people that were closest to him, and he picked up bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body broken for you. And you know, he took the wine glass and he's sitting with them and he said, this is my blood that's spilled for you. He's saying, I want you to remember this tribal story of who I am. I want you to remember this tribal story that you have this amazing God. It's the same amazing God that's doing those amazing things that we've seen in the last 17 years. And I want you to know, as we take communion, I know that I've often thought that my faith is this personal thing, right? It's this personal decision that I make with Jesus. But what I actually want to challenge all of us is that as we're doing this, I actually don't believe that there's even such a thing as a personal faith in Jesus. I think that as we elect to be a part of this tribe, it's actually this tribal story. It's this tribal thing that we're together being a part of. And I just challenge you, if you are a follower of Jesus, you are not having a personal faith, you're having a tribal faith. That's what we're going to be sharing tonight. And so as we take communion, I just want you to know that we're following Jesus' tribe. That's what we're doing. We're making a mark on ourselves that, Jesus, that's the mark of the tribe that I want to follow. I also want you to know if you're unsure about what tribe you're a part of, maybe you're saying, hey, Jesus, I'm not sure you are who you say you are. I'm still searching. I'm still looking for that. Hey, that's great. We are thrilled that you are here. You are in a great and a healthy place. And I just ask that you not take part of this marking piece. You not take a part of this communion piece, But as we're doing that, consider what tribe you want to be a part of. Consider what tribe you want to be a part of. I'm going to invite the volunteers up, and as they come up, there's going to be bread, and you'll come up, and they'll break the bread for you. They'll remind you, this is the body of Christ broken for you. Remember. And then we're a dipping community, so don't try and take the cup. So you take it. We're a dipping community. There'll be a wine glass. The wine glass has the wine. The juice glass, the smaller two, is the juice glass. You'll dip it, and they'll say, this is the blood of Christ shed for you. The table is open for all who are part of Jesus' tribe. I want to invite you into the tribe right now.